Welcome back to another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez, and you can find me on Twitter at JRFromPTC. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an Earth-like planet in Photoshop from scratch. We'll start by adding an ellipse, and we'll use layer styles to style that ellipse to create the atmospheric glow of the planet. I'll then show you how to create the continent texture from scratch, and how to apply it to the planet so that it wraps around it. I'll also show you how to easily create a star field by applying just a few simple filters. We'll finalize this project by adding the appropriate shadows and highlights, and by adding a bright star that will light the scene. Okay, let's get started with the tutorial. The first thing we're going to do is create the document that we're going to be working with. I'm going to go into File, New, and I'm going to create a document that's 1280 pixels wide by 720 pixels tall. I'm going to use black as my background color. Then I'm going to press OK. This is the canvas that we're going to be working with. And now I'm going to create the planet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold Shift, click and drag to create a perfect circle. I'm using black as my shape color. So now I have a black circle, and that's what I want. At this point, I'm not too worried about the positioning, so I'm just going to leave it here for now. I'm going to double click on the side of the circle here to bring up the layer style window. And what I'm going to do first is click on this icon here to reset the list to default. That way only the default layer styles are showing. If you're in a previous version of Photoshop before Photoshop CC 2015, you don't have to worry about this since that option is not available, and you will only see the default and no extra layer styles. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on inner shadow. Now, just because the label reads inner shadow doesn't mean that we have to use it as a shadow. We can actually use it as a glow by changing the blend mode and the colors. So we're going to change the blend mode to linear dodge, and the color, we're going to use this blue color here, something like that. Then I'm going to press OK. I'm also going to increase the distance. Now, the numbers that I have here may be a little bit different on your end. Just make sure that the end result looks something like this. So you may have to play around with the settings a bit, just because the size of your circle may be different than mine. Then I'm going to add an inner glow. And again, I'm going to change the blend mode to linear dodge add, and the color to a similar blue. You can use whatever color that you like. If you want to use the same colors that I'm using, you can just simply look at the number here and type that in on your end. But as long as you're close enough, you should get a similar result. Then press OK. And I'm going to change the size and range. And the size for this will be somewhere around here. And I'm also going to add an outer glow. And again, I'm going to change the blend mode to linear dodge add. And the color is going to be, again, a similar blue. Something like this. Press OK and increase the size. And maybe adjust the spread a little bit. And maybe adjust the range a little bit. So after applying the settings, your planet should look something like this. Then press OK. Now, I don't want a very sharp edge. That edge is somewhat sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this icon here, which is of my ellipse. Then I'm going to click on this icon here, which is the mask, and I can feather it just a little bit. So notice that now I don't have such a sharp line, and I can feather it as much as I want to. That's a little too much, of course. So in my case, maybe about 1 pixel will be okay. I'm going to right click on my image. I have the zoom tool selected, and I'm going to click on 100% just so I can see what it looks like. And that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to collapse this, and I'm also going to click on this icon here to collapse the layer styles just so I have a little more room to work with. And what we're going to do now is create the texture of the planet. If you want, you can go online into the NASA website, and they have a lot of images of planets that you can download and apply that texture onto the shape that you created. But for this tutorial, we're going to have a little more fun, and we're going to create a texture from scratch. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a new layer. Fill that layer with any color. So in this case, I'm just going to fill it with black. Black is my foreground color. So I held Alt and backspace to fill. Option backspace on the Mac. I can double click on the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window again. And I can click on pattern overlay. The pattern that I'm looking for is found under texture fill number 2. You can just press OK, and then just click on this icon here, which gives you this texture. This texture is called Stucco number 4. You can adjust the scale if you want. In my case, 100% is a good size, so I'll leave it at that. Then I'll press OK. I'm going to right click on the side of the layer here, not on the FX icon because I get different options, just in the empty space here, and click on rasterize layer. And now that effect is applied into a layer. So it's no longer a layer with a layer style on it. It's an actual layer with pixels. And this is going to be our continents. So I'll just call this continents. And I'm going to create one more layer. It's going to be a solid color. And I'm just going to create a color that will represent the oceans in my image. So I'm just trying to find a color here that sort of looks like an ocean. So maybe something like that. And of course I can adjust the color later. So I'll just call this layer ocean. And that's going to be below my continents layer. Then I'm going to click on the layer mask icon to add a layer mask. I have white and black as my foreground color, but it can be black and white. It really doesn't matter. But then go into filter, render, clouds, and you'll get this effect here. If I hold Alt Option on Mac and click on the layer mask, you'll see what the layer mask looks like. What I'm going to do now is go into Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and you'll see what threshold will do. I'm going to press Cancel because I don't want to be looking at the layer mask. I actually want to be looking at the working composition. So I'm going to hold Alt, click on the layer mask again to bring us back into the normal view. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and now I can click and drag the slider. And as you can see, this gives us the effect of continents, waters, islands, and things like that. So that's what I want. And you can just adjust this as much as you want to until you get a result that you're happy with. And once you're happy with it, just press OK. Then I'm going to zoom in, and these lines are too sharp, so I'm going to blur them a little bit. So I'm going to click on the layer mask here. Actually, double click on it to bring up the properties. And then I can click on Mask Edge. And for Mask Edge, you can either feather it, but in my case, I'm just going to smooth it. So I'm just going to click on there and use the up arrow to control the amount of smoothness. So maybe in between 1 or 2, I'll just do 1 and then press OK. So now I don't have those sharp edges. I'm going to double click on the zoom tool. That makes my image 100%. And this is what it's going to look like. Now it's time to color these continents. So I'm going to click on this icon here to create a gradient map adjustment layer. I want this gradient map to only affect the continent. So I'm going to click on this icon here to create a clipping mask. Notice the down pointing arrow. This means that this layer will only affect the layer right below it. Then I'm going to double click on this gradient to bring up the gradient editor. And I'm going to be working with 3 colors. And the first color that I'm going to work with is a green color. So I'm just going to find that color. So it's going to be sort of a darker green. Something like that. Then I'm going to press OK. Then I'm going to click here to create another swatch, which is going to turn it green. Obviously, I don't want to make it green, but the location needs to be in this around the 70% area. So 73 is fine. Then double click on that swatch to bring up the color picker. And now we're going to create the color of rock. So the green is obviously for areas that look green, and this color is going to be for areas that are rocky, so like mountains and things like that. So the color that I want, color something like this, maybe right over here somewhere. And then I'm going to press OK. So now this is looking more like continents. And you can play around with these, drag them to the left or to the right, and see how the adjustments change the image that you're working with. So maybe something like this. Then I'm going to press OK. What I'm going to do now is click on the continents layer, and then I'm going to go into filter, stylize, emboss, and it's going to create that effect here. I'm using -150, height of 3 pixels, amount of 165. Then I'm going to press OK. But before I do anything else, and this is very important, you can't click on anything else really, otherwise this won't work. You need to go into Edit, Fade, and we're going to fade the effect, but I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay, and I can decrease the strength. So this is what it looked like originally, and then we can just add some of that emboss to sort of raise it up a little bit. So that looks a little bit better. Then I'm going to press OK. Now I'm going to click above the gradient map. I'm going to add a new layer, and we're going to create some clouds. So I can just go into Filter, Render, Clouds, And what we're actually going to do is create clouds, the clouds that are going to cover our continents. So with the layer 1 selected, which is actually going to be our clouds, we're going to go into filter, liquify, and with the twirl tool selected, we're just going to click and twirl some of these clouds. You can use the bracket keys on the keyboard to increase and decrease the size of the brush. If you hold Alt Option on Mac, you twirl the other way. So I'm just creating an image that sort of looks more like realistic clouds. Then I'm going to press OK. So that's what our clouds look like. Then I'm going to go into the channels panel. And that's because I want to make a selection out of the white pixels. And I don't want to select the dark pixels. And that's so that I can add a bevel to this image to make the clouds even more realistic. Let me show you how that works. I can Command on the Mac, and click on the RGB icon here to make a selection of the bright pixels. Then in the layers panel, I can create a new layer and fill that layer with white. White is currently my background color. That means that I can hold Control, Backspace, Command, Backspace on the Mac to fill with white. Layer 1, which is the original layer we were working with, we don't need anymore. So I'm just going to click and drag that to the trash can. Layer 2 becomes our clouds. So you can just double click on that layer and just call it clouds. I'm going to press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect. And the clouds are looking pretty good. What I want to do now is add a little more shape to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and double click on the side of the layer here to bring up the layer style window. Click on Bevel and Emboss. Click on Contour, and then I can adjust the bevel to make the clouds seem like they have more depth and more shape. I'm going to click on the opacity here, and maybe the color is too dark, so I'll just make this a dark blue. I can play around with the size until I find something that I'm happy with. So maybe something like that. And then I'm going to press OK. So now we can add a layer mask if we want to, and just paint in areas with a soft brush that we want to hide using black, of course. So I have black selected. So you can use the bracket keys on the keyboard to increase and decrease the size of the brush. And in areas that I want to remove the clouds, I can just paint with black or paint with white to bring them back if I made a mistake. I'm not going to do too much of that. I just wanted to show you that option in case you needed it. So now I'm going to click on the clouds, and I'm going to click on the ocean while holding Shift. It's going to select all those layers. I'm going to right click on it and click on Convert to Smart Object. And now we have that all in one layer. What I'm going to do now is convert this layer into a clipping mask so it only shows on the planet layer. And this layer called Ellip 1, so I'm just going to rename that and call it Planet. And the Smart Object, which contains the continents, we'll just call this Texture. Then with this layer selected, you can just press Control Alt G, Command Option G on the Mac to turn that into a clipping mask. That means that the layer below it controls what pixels are visible. If I click on the Move tool, I can click and drag this around like so. Now at this point, you can do several things. You can, first of all, align your planet. So let's just assume that this is going to be the position where we're going to have our planet. You can just come in here, Control click on it to make a selection, click on the texture, and then go into Filter, Distort, Spherize, and just increase that all the way, press OK, and you distort the image, and it gives this spherical effect to it. Change the blend mode to overlay, and you click on the planet, add a new layer, and we're gonna paint with blue so we can reveal some of that planet. So I'm gonna click on the brush tool, I have a soft brush selected, I'm gonna double click on the foreground color, and the color that I'm looking for is a light blue that looks something like this. Press OK, and now if I paint with blue on here, you'll see the planet come out. We have the shadow and we have the highlight of the planet, and then you can adjust it by moving that paintbrush around like so. And you can of course adjust it by scaling it and moving that around any way you like. Now, I don't want my planet to be just sort of floating on the side there. I actually want it to be here at the bottom, very large. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on my planet layer there, then press Ctrl J to transform, then hold Shift, Alt, click and drag from one of the corner handles to increase the size of the circle, which is the planet, of course. And you can just place that accordingly. I want my planet to be down here somewhere, actually. and Shift Alt, click and drag on the corner. And I want my planet to be right about there. Then I'm going to click and drag on that there and maybe scale it differently just because the shape changed. And actually, you know what I'll do is I'm just going to press Control A, Command A on the Mac, and then hit backspace to delete all the pixels, and then press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect, and I'm just going to paint in a new bright spot. So maybe right here. Something like that. And I'm just going to delete this smart filter because I don't need it anymore. It's a different shape. So I'm going to click on Clear Smart Filters. And I can press Control T, Command T on the Mac to transform. And I'm just going to move this around and place it in whatever area I think looks good. So maybe right about here. This time I'm not going to use the sphere filter. I'm going to use something else. I'm going to right click on the texture and click on Warp. And I can click and drag on these handles here. So I'm going to sort of give it a spherical look just by clicking and dragging these handles like so. And I just feel I get a little more control and it looks better than using the Spherize filter. So you may want to do that if you're placing your planet in a similar way. Then I'm going to press Enter. Since I'm using a smart object, this is non-destructive. So if I press Control T, Command T on the Mac, right click, go to Warp, I can continue making adjustments if need be. What I'm going to do now is create stars. There's a lot of ways in which you can create stars, and I'll show you one of the easiest ways. So I'm going to click on the background layer, add a new layer, fill that layer with black, Alt backspace to fill with foreground color. Foreground color is currently black, so my new layer is black. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Noise, add noise. 63% noise works fine. Gaussian, monochromatic, press OK. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and a Gaussian blur of 1 pixel will be okay. Then I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, and we're going to use Threshold again. And you can add some stars. So a few stars here, or you can add a whole bunch, like right there. For something like this, I believe that maybe about this many stars will work. And I'm going to press OK. What I'm going to do now is something we did earlier. I'm going to disable these 3 layers, the planet highlight, and that's what I'll call it. I'll call it planet highlight so we know what it is. Planet highlight and the texture. Disable those 3 layers. So now we only see the stars. Then I'm going to go into the channels panel, hold Control, Command of the Mac, click on the RGB just so we load the white pixels. I can create a new layer and fill with white. White is our background color. So you can press Control backspace. If I press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect, and delete layer 2, we now have a layer that just has the stars, no black. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can create a better effect. So if you look at the stars here, we can actually blur them a little bit. So go to Filter and just click on Blur. Then double click on the side here, add an outer glow. We can use the same blue we were using before and just adjust the size of the blur. And now we have these stars that have a blue blur, which looks a lot more realistic. Then I can double click on this icon here for the zoom tool to zoom out. We can enable all the other layers and we get this result here. If the stars layer, and let me rename this layer and call it stars. If the stars are too bright, which I think they are in this case, you can just bring down the opacity. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring down the opacity to maybe about 40%. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new layer and we're going to create a highlight. Maybe this planet has a sun and it's rising from the back here, which is why the top of the planet is bright. So I'm going to fill this layer with black, but before I do, I'm going to click on the Move tool. I'm going to go into Windows, Info panel, and I'm just going to see the coordinates X and Y right here. When I hover over, there's a couple numbers there. The numbers are 640 and 322 for me. They were right there in case you missed them. And I'm going to now fill this layer with black. So black is my foreground color. I can hold Alt and backspace, Option backspace on the Mac. Then I can go into Filter, Render, Lens Flare, and I can enter those coordinates by holding Alt and clicking on this space here, which brings on the precise flare center, and I can type in 640, 322, and press OK. And now my lens flare is in the right spot, and you can choose what lens flare you want to use. I'm going to choose 105mm prime, and then I can adjust the brightness, so maybe something like this, and press OK. Then I can change the blend mode to screen, and with that layer selected, I can go into image, adjustments, hue and saturation, colorize, and maybe I find an appropriate color. So maybe blue color like that, and press OK. I'm actually going to create a new layer and add a second lens flare, just so you can see what two different kinds of lens flares will look like, and maybe we can even mix them and get an even better lens flare. So I'm going to go into filter, render, lens flare. I'm going to choose movie prime. I'll leave the same brightness, 64, press OK, and change the blend mode to screen. So that's the first lens flare. This is the second, and maybe even both of them together look good. So with the second one selected, I can either leave it with that reddish color, or I can go into image, adjustments, hue and saturation, and I can either colorize it to make it the same color, or I can just click on this slider and move it around and maybe pick a different color, like maybe yellow. But I want to keep the same color, so I'm just going to click on colorize and leave it at a blue color like that, and press OK. I'm going to select these two layers, hold shift and click on both these layers to select them, press Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac, and I'm just going to call this group flare, that way we know what they are. And at this point, what you can start doing is making any adjustments. For example, you can go back into the inner glows or inner shadows of the planet and make some adjustments. For example, you can increase the size or decrease it, and you can see what the changes do on the fly. You can also go into the textures. You can double click on the texture. It opens up on a new tab, but if you go into window, arrange, two up vertically, you have them side by side. So maybe you can click on the planet here, hold the space bar, and sort of center it so you can see it. And you can come back into the texture here, and you can make adjustments. For example, maybe you can see what it looks like without clouds. Then I can press Control S, Command S on the Mac to save, and that's what it looks without clouds. Not too good in my opinion, so I'll bring those back. And I'm also going to make some adjustments on the continents here. Maybe you can come in with a black brush and maybe come in here and just make some rivers there. Maybe a lake here, rivers coming off of it. Press Control S, Command S on the Mac to save, and you see those here. Obviously, I didn't take my time. You get better results if you take a little more time, but you saw where I was going with that. You can make adjustments, save them, and then see how they reflect on the planet. To be frank with you, I'm not really happy with the clouds. They're just not noticeable. So at this point, I may just do that all over again. Maybe I needed more contrast to begin with, and I'm just gonna disable this clouds layer, and I'll quickly create more clouds with more contrast. So I'm gonna go to Filter, Render, Clouds, and I'm gonna go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and just adjust the levels of the clouds until you find something that you like. So maybe something like this, and I'm actually gonna zoom out so we can see all of it, and it looks pretty good. Then I'm gonna go into Filter, Liquify, and I'm just gonna make those adjustments. I'm holding Alt to twirl the opposite way, and then I'm gonna press OK, and I'm gonna go into the Channels panel, Control, click, make a selection around the bright pixels, add a new layer, fill it with white, Control backspace because white is our background color, disable this layer, and actually delete it. We don't need it anymore, so click and drag it out onto the trash can. And maybe I can copy these effects and put them on the new clouds layer. So I'm going to hold Alt on the FX icon, click and drag it to the new layer, and you'll see the effects here. I'm going to press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect, and I'm going to press Control S to save. And these clouds look a little bit better. So that's what they look like now, and this is what they look like before. So you can decide which clouds you want to use. Maybe you can use a combination of both, but that might be a little too strong. And this is what a combination of both looks like. Obviously, that's a little too strong. Maybe We can bring down the opacity on the original ones and maybe that works. We'll see. And like I said, you can just keep playing around until you find something that you're happy with. I'm going to close this tab for now. Then I'm going to double click on this icon here just to make sure that we're looking at the image at 100%. And that's how you create a planet in Photoshop from scratch. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with a friend. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.